Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is this week's episode of Depuy, Pinnacle, Litigation Update. And I'm your host, GF. And again, some people have noticed that my moniker has changed. The reason for that is going to be the second article we're going to talk about today. Why is it that we should be very careful about our monikers when we discuss our cases of our hips, our pinnacles, our hip implant, and our doctor, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the reason we're going to come up with it's not any fear of being sued. It's something else entirely. I think it will shock you. So please stay tuned for the second half. And if you find anything of value, click down below on the like button and the bell so that you can be reminded of future efforts, and subscribe, of course, and that will get you the future efforts on my behalf without having to do anything on your part. But let's get into number one. What is going on? Where's the money? Well, I'm glad you asked that. Thank you. June 19th is the latest communication that I can find. If anybody has a later one emanating from either Depuy or Johnson & Johnson, please get it to me. You should have my email down below. If not, I'll put it up down below on the page. But for now, you can send it to the address of this podcast. Let's talk about what the 19th was and why we haven't seen any additional information other than myself. The 19th was the last unofficial, it wasn't an official binding anything, but an unofficial leak of information from Depuy revealing their intention to settle about 2/3 of the outstanding 10,000 cases. Now, their grounds for settling them were completely different than what my lawyer told me. My lawyer first told me in the beginning of June they were settling the little cases, the ones that were not a big threat to them, that weren't a big risk of money. They were settling them, and the bigger cases they were keeping to settle later or, if necessary, to go to trial. Well, I don't know if that's true, if that's false, if he knew what he was talking about, but the thing I do know is that on the 19th, according to the best information we can find, which is Bloomberg Financial, they let out one of their unofficial communications saying, we're going to settle with those people that have had revision surgery. Boy, there's a word I'll bet you're sick of. And I had real strictly requested from my lawyer information as to the 3 verdicts that had come down in the past 3 years. Were any of those people that had gotten a share, let's say, a portion of the $500 million or $1 billion, had any of them not had surgery? In other words, are you a threat to Depuy or Johnson & Johnson of taking from them $100 million even though you have not had the revision surgery? I was told by my attorney's secretary that, yes, one of the 5 packs that had gone before the court had been a group of 5 people from California that had not had surgery. But I haven't confirmed it. That'll be my homework for this week, and we'll pick it up next week. But the important thing for you to remember is, so Johnson & Johnson, Depuy, one and the same, are still back at square one, saying, hey, we're only paying if you've had revision surgery. If you haven't had revision surgery, take a hike. And there is no official way that I can check to see if they've actually settled any cases. It seems they might have. I did speak to the clerk of the court, and who was not thrilled with me calling, and said that the court has not placed the trial that was taken off calendar due to Depuy stating that they were going to settle all the cases. The court has not set a date to hear the motion of the plaintiff's attorney, not the plaintiffs that have been so successful, not those five, the gang of five, but of a different group of attorneys who say, hey, we want our day in court, and the efforts by Depuy were really just diversionary. They were just trying to send you the wrong way, Judge. They don't have any intention on really settling, and when they made us these little offers that they did, in the few cases they did, the offers were ridiculous. So, we've got some fun to look forward to. I would not be surprised at all if next week, not this week, this is the week ending on the 30th of August, if the next week we get a hearing date from Judge Kincaid. What that means is that on the his calendar, it will say the court is setting oral motion for a hearing on the motion to be restored to the trial calendar. It'll set the date for the hearing on that, which would be sometime in October or November. And if the matter is still going at that time, the judge will have both parties in, not us. We don't have to go. Thank goodness. We don't have to go, but he will have the attorneys, the ones that are asking that the court move the cases back onto the calendar, and the attorneys for Johnson & Johnson and Depuy, have them in, and they will be allowed to make brief oral arguments, and the judge will remind them, as I always did when I was serving as a judge, I've read your papers. You don't have to tell me what is in your paperwork. That I've read. Do you have anything that's not in your paperwork that you want to tell me? That will be what will happen, and then the judge will rule on whether they should be back on the trial calendar. We could do 5 more shows on whether that would help us to get on the trial calendar, and I've already explained many of the blockade issues we have, including somehow the only lawyers who get into that courtroom with Judge Kincaid are the same 5, over and over and over. That question about, well, does that mean I should switch to one of those 5 lawyers? You are welcome to call. I can't predict what will happen, but I can just tell you they have a whole department in charge of turning down the calls from the people who are just begging that they take their case away from whoever their current attorney is. All right, so shall we move on to issue number 2, the mysterious why, if you send me information or later when we get calls into the show, why you're going to have to use a little bit of secrecy and stealth and have some sort of moniker that you use here. And it's very interesting. I was reading an article sometime earlier this week on identity theft and what a huge problem it is and how it's just getting worse. And the author of the article, it's the same criminal who was a very high well-known criminal, and the movie was made about him, Catch Me If You Can. Well, he's written a book about identity theft, and in it he mentions that on the dark web, which is not anything to do with the Hillary Clinton or any of that. The dark web is a real thing, and it's a portion of the internet that is not controlled by the police or by any state. It's just a secret place that people have found where people can meet, not have their conversations listened to, recorded, or worry about what law enforcement might think about what they say, and use that as a locale to organize illegal activities. So anything I say, if you take any action on it, it's at your own risk. I am not advising anybody to go there. But one of the amazing things that this author said is that if they have your ID, let's say they got your social security number and your address, your name, and maybe a picture of you, and maybe even your mom's maiden name, well, that sells on the dark web for about $25. So in other words, the crook pays $25 to the seller, who really also is a crook, and then uses that information to order some credit cards in your name delivered to him, set up some fake credit accounts at stores, buy some merchandise, get it shipped to him, and do all sorts of bad stuff in your name, hoping that you won't catch it and he gets to keep the merchandise. And even if you do catch it, most of the time the store shuts down the account, but this person has still gotten the merchandise. And it's very rare that the police are actually able to track down where the merchandise is, where it went, how did this person get it, and arrest the person, which really is the goal, or get the merchandise back, which is a good secondary goal. Okay, so the point of that is not my point. The point of that is that information sells for about $25 on the web. What about your medical history? Yes, I'm talking about you. What about if I've got the information about what kind of hip implant you had implanted? Oh, Depuy Pinnacle. And what was the date? And so you were in the hospital, right? And what was the stay in your hospital? What dates were you in there? And who's your doctor? And all of that medical information, if I can use the little bit that the seller sells me to open the doors, and that's how it's done, and then get all the rest of the information so that I have your complete medical background on the web, the dark web, that sells for $1,000. They use all that information to fool doctors, accounting departments in hospitals. They use it to make all sorts of phony accounts that they set up for fake driver's licenses, which they use to get fake credit cards, and they can just go hog wild with all the information that they can get out of your medical file once they get a hold of it from, let's say, Kaiser or Blue Shield or Blue Cross, if they're still around. So that is why the cost on the dark web of your medical records and ID is $1,000. So if they can get you your information, they can make a lot of money. So they scan social media, that's us, for any information they can find. So anybody, and I do mean anybody who is using their real name right now has to change it or should change it and just go by a nice moniker. And it's a little harder to do than it should be, but doing it with Facebook took me about 45 minutes to figure out. It was not well laid out. If you have a 10-year-old in your house, they can do it in about 5 minutes. So that's really the best way to do it. And when you send in any of your questions, or if you're going to call in, which we'll do later in the year, we're always going to have monikers, and we're going to have things to disguise your ID, and even request that you don't provide us your ID so that we cannot slip and give it out to the public accidentally. So everything we do here has to be under the name, under a moniker, under a phony name, under this, under that, so that those bad people that are watching the social media in order to do identity theft have no information about who did your surgery when and what hospital and all that, because they can use that to call the hospital, say it's you, say, hi, I had that so-and-so surgery on such and such a date. Do you remember that? Oh, yeah, it was Dr. So-and-so. And remember, what if they've got your $25 they've paid for your personal ID? They can say, oh, yeah, I forgot. Here's my birth date and here's my social security number. That's it. If they tell them that, the hospital will give them free reign of your file. Everything. Everything they want to know is in there. I've seen people get credit card numbers out of there where they got it because the person had used the credit card to pay at the window when they left the hospital to pay for all the things that weren't covered. So you really don't want to do that, and we're not going to let you make a mistake and do that. So there's going to be no real names and things like that, and you should make sure that anytime you call here or write here, or if you post things down below on the show, if you're on our Facebook page, or if you're even on our YouTube page, make sure you don't use your real name. We really don't want any details of your medical history going out under your real name. And with that, we'll call it a day. Thanks for listening.